The most important thing to think about when it comes to feedback is how important it is. There's something called the knowledge curse, or the curse of knowledge, and what that basically means is the more you know about something, the harder it is to explain to somebody else. If you think about something you know really well, even as simple as walking, for example, how you start to explain it to somebody who doesn't know how to do it, you almost don't know where to start because it seems so obvious to you. And this is what happens with researchers. The more they get into their research, the more they understand their own research, the more difficult it is to take that step back and to know, where should I start explaining? What can I assume is obvious and what can I assume needs to be talked about? It's almost impossible for you to know and to make these choices without somebody coming in there and saying, this part needs to be explained more and this part you've explained 5 times already. The other thing that happens with a knowledge curse is that what you've actually written very seldom resembles what you actually had in your head. So a lot of times you will look at something that you've written and you'll think, well, yes, this is exactly what I meant to say, but you're not actually reading the words. You're just looking at words that remind you of what you tried to say, which is not the same thing as reading what you actually wrote. So having somebody else look at it can help pull you out of that and see the difference between what it is you thought you were writing and what it is you actually wrote. Everybody needs this kind of feedback. In fact, the better writer you are, the more important this is, because the more invested you are in your writing and the more difficult it is to see. You even become literally blind to your own typos after a certain point where you simply cannot see that a word is missing or repeated or spelled wrong. There are a lot of different kinds of feedback you can get. You can get feedback early in the process, you can get it later in the process, you can get it from somebody talking to you, you can get it from written comments. You can have a formal conversation with somebody or a formal written feedback, or you can have informal feedback. You can get feedback from a writing expert, like a copy editor, who will talk about your language. You can get feedback from, for example, a supervisor who's talking about your method or talking about your research. You can have feedback from a colleague who's just simply talking about whether or not this is interesting to you or interesting to them. With all these different types of feedback, it's very much up to you to decide what kind of feedback you're ready for at any given time and what kind of feedback will really help you. One type of feedback that I find to be particularly useful at an early stage of writing is what I call the good conversation. And this is when you work with a colleague of yours or somebody who at least you can meet with and talk to. And this is about talking about your work on a very basic level rather than commenting on specific sentences or your writing as writing. This is more about the ideas that are in the writing. And it helps to talk about your writing in a general way before they even read the draft. For example, explaining to them why you're interested in this in the first place or what you found most exciting about this work so far. It's a good way to get them into your head so they can also see what it is you find exciting or intriguing about this particular work. When they start reading your work, make sure that you tell them to be thinking about the larger things. What is the question? What is the answer? What is the main argument you have in the paper? Rather than focusing on details like grammar or spelling. And when you get a chance to sit down and talk with them, what's nice about having it as a conversation rather than written is that they can ask you questions, things that they felt unsure about. There's something, it makes it easier to handle criticism when people ask you a question and say, I'm sorry, but can you explain what you meant right here? Rather than getting a written comment back that just has a circle and says unclear. The most formal kind of feedback you can get is the peer review you get back from journals. Now this feedback, because it matters so much in terms of whether or not your work gets published, you need to spend some time thinking about it before you react. It helps to read it through and then maybe wait a week or two before you decide what you're going to do with it. You don't have to do everything the peer reviewers tell you, and you might find indeed that some of them are disagreeing with each other or giving you somewhat mixed messages about what it is they want you to do. Take a step back and think to yourself, what of all this feedback is going to help make my paper better? Because you need to own the feedback. You need to feel like this is your paper and the feedback is supposed to help you make it better. When you submit your paper back to the journal again, make sure that you send with it a revision memo where you've explained precisely what you've done with each comment the reviewers have given you. When you write a revision memo back to the journal, when you resubmit, you need to go through each of the comments the reviewers gave you and explain what it is you did. You can agree with the comment and say, this is what I did, see page 3, paragraph 2, or you can agree with the essence of the comment, but say, yes, I understand why you wanted me to take into account this piece of literature, for example, but I thought it was a little bit of a tangent and I'm already over my word limit, so I decided not to add that, but I do understand why you wanted me to do that. Or you can actually outright disagree with a comment, but make sure that you explain why. You can say, for example, reviewer 3 wanted me to add this section on this and this, but this is completely irrelevant for my work, so I've gone back to the introduction and made it much more clear what time period I'm covering so that this is no longer an issue. The important thing about doing this is, again, making sure that the paper is yours, that you own it, and you take responsibility for all of the revisions that you make.